Thank you so much. All right, good afternoon, folks. For our folks joining us from Europe, good morning for everyone joining us from the United States. Thrilled to have you joining us here today for Making Awareness Stick. Ben didn't mention, first of all, this will be recorded. So if you have to drop off at any point, not a problem. You can check the recording, or if you want to share it with anyone else. Real quick, my name is Lance Spitzner, and I'm the training director for SANS Securing the Human. So that means my job, but also my passion, is working with organizations around the world, making high-impact awareness programs, creating secure behaviors, and ultimately secure cultures. So one of the things I wanted to share with you today were the lessons learned from hundreds of organizations on how people are really making awareness stick. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump on in. Oh, by the way, as we're going through this webcast, if you have any thoughts you want to share up there on Twitterland, by all means, we'd love to have you share. And you can share via SANS Webcast or hashtag SANS Webcast. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is before we jump in and start talking about how to make this stick, well, what's the problem? What are we trying to solve here? So let's take a step back and look at what is the human element and what's the challenge we're facing. Well, first of all, people in a lot of ways are like computers. Computers, operating systems, whatever you want to call it. Technology stores, processes, and transfers information. Now, 15 years ago, these systems that were storing, processing, and transferring information were pretty insecure. It was really easy to hack a computer in the old days. Put a default installation of Microsoft NT on the internet, and we'd be hacked literally in minutes. So we all felt a lot of pain, and Microsoft did a lot of work to secure the Microsoft operating system. Here's a great slide inspired from James Line on all the work that Microsoft has done installing controls to secure the Microsoft operating system. Now keep in mind, this is a high-level overview. There's a lot more that Microsoft has packed into this. But long story short, nowadays, if I take a Microsoft, a Microsoft 10 operating system, Windows 10 operating system, and put it on the internet today, it'll take months, if not years, before the system is hacked because they've gotten pretty good at locking down the operating system. Now, as we all know, this all radically changes, all bets off when people touch the keyboard. And why is that? Well, first of all, people are nothing more than another operating system. You and I store, process, and transfer information. We're just simply called the human OS. So let's take a quick visual comparison of everything that's been done to secure the Windows operating system compared to the human operating system. And what we're going to see here is not a lot. So one of the first things I like to address is this. Quite often in the security world, I hear people say, you can't patch stupid, or you get security people looking down on end users. Quite often when somebody in the security world says you can't patch stupid, you can't secure people, I tell them take a moment to look in the mirror. What I'm trying to say, long story short, is the problem is not with people. The problem is with us, the security community. We've done very little to secure the human operating system. What we need to do is communicate to people in their own language and help them understand what these risks are and help them change their behaviors so they can be more secure. So how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, my whole goal here is to help you develop a mature security awareness program. How do we do something like that? This diagram here, this matrix, this model, was developed by about 200 security awareness officers. So it's a consensus group project to help you visualize where your program is and where it's going. And what you tend to find is this. Most organizations, I'll ask, most organizations, yes, we have an awareness program. But you start digging and then you find out, well, it's ran by the audit team or it's ran by the compliance team. Yeah, we have awareness training, but it's once a year. Death by PowerPoint, or maybe a couple of newsletters. That is an awareness program, but that is a compliance-focused, compliance-driven program. Check the box. What I'm seeing is organizations are taking a fundamental shift where they're going from compliance-focused to going to behavior-focused, promoting awareness and focusing on behavior change, and then ultimately going beyond just behavior change, but cultural change too, how people think and perceive about security. That's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm passionate about. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm not saying compliance is not important. No, compliance is very important for most organizations. All we're doing is how do we pump up the volume, take things to the next level where we're changing behavior and ultimately changing culture. And that's why we're here today. That's why we want to make awareness stick. So we can secure the human operating system, something traditionally our community has not been very good at. And how do we secure the human operating system? By changing behavior and ultimately changing culture. So let's take a step back. What is behavior and what is behavior change? I mean, this is not a radically new field. People have been studying behavior change for a long time. So one of my favorite resources on behavior change and behavior modeling is by a professor, Dr. B.J. Fogg. He's a PhD out of Stanford University. And what he's done is broken down behavior into a very simple model. What you see here, B equals MAT. In other words, for someone to exhibit a specific behavior, they need to be motivated, they need the ability, and there needs to be a trigger or prompt to say, hey, it's time to exhibit this behavior. Now, what I love about this model, what B.J. Fogg has done is he's taken 20 years of research and put it into something that, a security geek like me can understand. And the whole idea is this. On the left of the axis, you see motivation. On the bottom, ability. Long story short, the more motivation somebody has, and or the easier it is to exhibit a behavior, the more likely they will do it when the trigger is there, when the prompt is there, when it's time to do the behavior. Now, this is very simple, but by looking at this, you can really begin to understand why a lot of times people aren't changing behavior. One of the most common challenges I tend to find in the security field is we tend to perceive people are not motivated. So we tend to work on that axis to the left there, motivation. We tend to continually beat people on the head on why security is important, throwing all sorts of statistics and numbers on them, believing the more we push people, the more likely they'll change the behavior. Surprisingly, based on my work with all these different organizations, a lot of people are actually interested in security. They read about it in the newspaper every day, and they want to be secure. The problem is, it's not easy for them to do. Look at the bottom of ability. What we in the security world perceive easy, others perceive hard. So for example, passwords. For years, security people have been lamenting on how the ordinary computer user doesn't use secure passwords. But then we go on to tell them, well, it's got to be long, complex, numbers, symbols, the blood of a virgin. Who knows? Oh, and by the way, every account has to be unique. It's got to be changed every 90 days, and you can't write it down. So we put them in this impossible no-win situation, and we've made something very, very hard to do, and then wonder why no one's doing it. What we need to do is take a step back, and how can we make this as simple as possible to do? So it's just not motivation, but how do we make a process simple? So instead of beating them to death on all these things, introduce them to maybe something like password managers or two-step verification. And what's really interesting, there's even an academic term for this called, curse of knowledge. And the whole idea with the curse of knowledge is sometimes the more you are an expert in a subject, the worse you are in communicating it. The reason being is your perceptions of what others know are based on what you know. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is keep this BJ Fogg behavior model in mind, but the other thing is this. One of the key things I have found is communication is key in the awareness program. In fact, what I'm starting to see organizations doing is it's not called security awareness officer or security education officer, it's security communications officer. The whole idea being that what we need, it's not so much an issue of what we need people to do. We know what we need people to do. Where we're failing is how we communicate it. And the problem we're facing is this idea of curse of knowledge. In a lot of ways, security awareness officers should not be security people. They should be communications people, or have some communications background, or some communications training, or bring in somebody from communications team. And this is one of the reasons why awareness programs are not sticking, is this. So once a year, every year, over at Securing the Human, we do an annual survey of security awareness officers. We kind of like to think of it as, the equivalent of the Verizon DDI, but for the security awareness community. The other reason we like to think of it as the Verizon DDI is the head of the Verizon DDI report is a chap named Bob Rudis, and he helps us with this also. One of the most fascinating things we found out with last year's report was this. Did you know that about 80 to 90% of security awareness officers come from highly technical backgrounds, including me, okay? And by highly technical, I'm not only talking information security, but anything IT related. Security awareness officers coming from IT admins, coming from, webmaster, database, things along those lines. Less than 10% have, more like 5%, have any type of softer skill backgrounds, communications, marketing, training, human resources. So long story short, to ultimately change behavior, we got to be sure people are motivated and have the ability to change that behavior. And where we tend to find most organizations failing is not what we're telling people to do, but how we're communicating that. So when we communicate our awareness program, we have to be sure we're communicating why this is important, but communicate in easy terms, a simple process for people to follow. This is why I am going to be focusing on communication for the rest of this talk, because that is the key to making awareness stick. That is the key to changing behavior and ultimately changing culture. So how do we make awareness stick? How do we communicate effectively? Well, first of all, we start with the why. And when I say why, I'm not saying why are you, the organization, doing a security awareness program. What we want to do with the why is explain to people in their own terms, why does cybersecurity matter? Why should I care? What's in it for me? Because if you can answer this question in a very simple statement, in a very simple way, you're going to get people engaged, they'll understand, potentially create a sense of urgency, and begin to change. Now, one of the key things I've learned, and this is once again why awareness programs fail, is we want to communicate at an emotional level. We don't want to rationalize with numbers or statistics or something like that, but explain to people emotionally why they should care. Once again, this helps explain why a lot of awareness programs fail to stick, because we are throwing numbers. The first thing awareness program starts off with, 38 million, personal records stolen last month, last year, things along. Where 10,000 attacks every 8 minutes. No, we got to communicate emotionally. And if you're interested in learning more about this, near the bottom, I have a book called Made to Stick. Probably one of the best books I've ever read on Communication. It's written by a set of brothers named Dan and Chip Heath. It's, by the way, a very easy book to read. So, download it to your Kindle, your tablet, your iPad, read it on your next flight, boom, you're good to go. And what both John Cotter, another book, and the Heath brothers say is you really got to focus at an emotional level, but it's got to be very succinct, not paragraphs of reasons, but something very short. The Heath brothers call this almost like a commander's intent. So how can we do this? What would this look like for your organization? Well, I like to break the why question down into two levels. The organization, why should the organization care? And then why should the individual care? So for example, at an organizational level, say you have a lot of industrial control systems. So you're in transportation, railways, trucks, you're in manufacturing, you're in utilities, power plant, refinery, something along those lines. A lot of these organizations have a very strong safety culture because people can and will get hurt if people do not have safe behaviors. Well, instead of trying to change their culture and make it a security culture, adapt to that culture. Cybersecurity is safety. By being cyber secure, we prevent hackers from taking over a system, we prevent accidents happening, things like that. So cybersecurity is safety. Healthcare. Healthcare is a very strong culture of patient well-being. I almost think of empathy. Cybersecurity helps us better take care of customers. So if you're not sure how you can plug yourself in at an organizational level, ask a simple question. Where does your employees' pride come from? And how can cybersecurity help them achieve that goal and help them develop that pride? But what we're also seeing very successful with organizations is to really make awareness stick, not only at answering, how does this benefit the organization, but the individual. This is really effective because if you think about it, most of the technologies your organization uses, people use. Most of the risks and the threat for your organization, same thing for people at a personal level. So yes, we have mobile devices at work, we have passwords at work, we have email phishing attacks at work, but so do people at home. I bet 80 to 90% of the behaviors you're trying to build in your organization, the what part, are the same behaviors people want to exhibit at home to protect themselves. So what you do is this. In your communications, it's not just about securing your organization, but you want to help your employees at a personal level, how to protect themselves at home, how to build home networks securely, how to protect their kids online. Now you've really hit them at an emotional level. I mean, what's more emotional than protecting their personal device, protecting or helping secure their kids? But what's really great also is this. Not only are they far more likely to listen, it's far more likely to stick. But the beauty of it now is it's not like people have one set of behaviors at home, then they come to work, and then, oh, I'm at work now, I need to change my behaviors, I now need to have more secure behaviors. No. Security becomes part of almost their DNA. Same behaviors at work as at home. And to be honest, in the 21st century, this is becoming far more important as the two worlds blend. The whole idea of, bring your own device, BYOD, working from home, or, people work on vacation and they're taking vacation while at work kind of thing. The whole worlds are blending. So this is actually becoming even more important. So this helps understand the why part, why people should listen. But how can we effectively communicate to your organization? Well, we in the security world tend to think in the world of bits and bytes. So one of the first things we have to do if you're involved in security awareness is take a step out of our comfort zone. We're going to have to really develop our soft skills. If you're not comfortable with that, Find somebody who is good with soft skills in your organization and have them help you. Somebody like human resources. They know the culture of your organization. Or somebody in communications department, somebody in maybe even the marketing department. Because once you identify or figure out the why part, why people should listen, we then have to communicate this new vision. And to really effectively communicate, you have to know your culture. So, for example, are you conservative organization or are you outgoing organization? Things along the generational differences. I know organizations that have 200 people they could all be in the same town, but have radically different cultures because younger generation just coming out of college, radically different than older generation that's been around for 30, 40, 50 years. Or issues like localization. If you're a large organization, and by large, it could be, just 1,000 people, 5,000, or up to, or bigger 100, 500,000, then you're probably going to have multiple cultures. But culture is important because that will help drive how you communicate. What do I mean? So, for example, I like to categorize cultures as either outgoing or conservative. It's a simplistic approach, but this really does help break down things and helps you understand how you may need to change how you communicate. So outgoing cultures, they tend to be things like marketing firms, tech companies, think of Facebook, Salesforce, universities, somebody involved in hospitality. And when in outgoing cultures, tend to be maybe a bit younger generationally, tend to be very technology focused. So they're going to want to use technology when they learn. It has to be mobile device, maybe social media. Also, they tend to prefer to watch as opposed to read. So, for example, videos, CBT, gamification, online gaming, podcast, webcast kind of thing. Also, they tend to want a little fun, entertaining material. So, people over here in North America, we would use the term sassy. Folks in Europe, UK, probably use the term cheeky, but it would be a little bit more, humor would help really in the communication side, as opposed to something that's a little bit more conservative. If your organization is conservative, financials, defense, insurance, legal, what I tend to find is when you communicate, little less humor. You're going to have to be a little more serious, subdued, professional. People tend to prefer to read the content, newsletters, slides, or maybe something in person, a lunch and learn, PowerPoint presentation, interact directly with people. Now, what I tend to find is I'm guessing most of you, probably about 70%, are probably more on the conservative side. Well, think about it. Conservative organizations tend to be more concerned about security, and they're more likely to have an awareness program. If you have a conservative culture, it actually can be an advantage because when you're communicating your awareness program, it's easier to stand up above all the noise. Probably to date you've had other awareness programs, awareness for safety, sexual harassment, ethics, and I bet a lot of it's been traditional and boring. But pumping up the volume just a little bit, just being a bit edgy, a bit sassy, a bit cheeky, you can really stand out and start reaching people, communicating to them, and making awareness stick. So let's dig in a little bit. How can we do this? One of the first areas I'm really seeing a lot of effectiveness is this idea of push versus pull. Push is traditional communication, sending out emails to everyone, all right? People are fatigued, overwhelmed with email. The whole concept of pushing out information doesn't work well. The other problem is when you push, you tend to work on your own schedule. So an example would be in a lunch and learn. You're pushing out a lunch and learn. People have to attend at a certain point and certain time. 10% may show up. Reason being, people are busy. They're not bad, but they've got meetings, conference calls, they're on vacation, they're sick, they're at a different office. Where I tend to find now is the pull method, where people go and get the information on their own schedule, on their own time. So in other words, things like computer-based training, download a newsletter, download a podcast, go to a portal, read the information when they want. Remember that BJ Fogg model? The easier we make something, the more likely people will do it. Well, it works in communication also. If we adapt to people's way of learning, if we make it as easy as possible for them to consume the content, the more likely they will then consume, and the more likely they'll learn and to change behavior. So please keep in mind, especially with the younger generation, they're going to want to consume content in their own schedule and their own way. So key thing here, hopefully you're already beginning to see, you can't communicate in any one single format. You're going to have to communicate in multiple formats. And also, once a year, as we mentioned when we started, you can't do once a year. You can do once a year if all you care about is checking the box to be compliant. But you would not patch your computer once a year. You're patching your computer, constantly, at a minimum once a month. Same thing for the human operating system. We want to be constantly touching them in many different ways, and we want to do it in different formats because different people learn in different ways. So what are some different ways that we can communicate to people? Well, first of all, there's computer-based training. What's great about computer-based training is, once again, people consume on their own schedule. They watch part of a video, pause it, bookmark it, come back tomorrow, watch the rest of it. Then what ends up happening, they can watch it, during lunch, in the morning, at night, if they really love it, on the weekend, things along those lines. Now, is watching computer-based training once a year going to change behavior and make your organization secure? Absolutely not. But what it will do is help lay that foundation. You're communicating through that training what behaviors people need to do, how to do them, and then you're answering that question, why? Why is it important to them? So this lays the foundation. But then we also need ways to continually touch and reinforce throughout the year. And there's so many different ways. I cannot tell you all the different ways to do this. However, let me give you some key ideas. Newsletters. Newsletters are a wonderful way to communicate. People can consume on their own, and if you do it effectively, instead of, a newsletter, data classification, all right? You announce a newsletter on data classification, you're going to have probably 10 people download it. But announce a newsletter, what is antivirus? How to secure your personal mobile device? How to secure your kids online? Things like that. That people will consume because it helps them personally. It hits them at an emotional level. So now what happens is when you're creating this content, start keeping in mind it going viral. So you put out a newsletter, and not only are people downloading it, but they're taking it home. They're sharing it with their kids, their neighbors, their family. This is ultimately a good thing because we're building the behaviors not only at work but at home, so they're more likely to also exhibit those behaviors. So we want to build the content to go viral. Just be prepared for it to go viral too. So the last thing you want to do is do a newsletter on, securing your home network and then have the CEO's, personal mobile device contact information in there. Just be prepared for it to go viral. In fact, one of my favorite metrics when you're starting to make awareness really stick, when you start hitting people at an emotional level, be prepared for employees to start asking how their family can take the training, how their friends can take the training. All right, now newsletters may be great for your culture, may not work well for your culture. Then there's posters. Once again, just all you're attempting to do is reinforce topics. Will computer-based training once a year change behavior? No. Will a newsletter once a year? No. A poster once a year? No. But when you combine all these elements and you're continuously communicating to people, yes, you start changing behavior. Notice the poster on the left. That's folks from GM Financial. They were so kind to share one of their examples. Very simple, hit people at an emotional level. Poster on the right, Caterpillar, using their branding of yellow. Once again, these are just some of the key things we want you to do to be secure. Posters may be great for your environment. If you're a law firm, probably not so much. So many other ways to communicate. Blogging, maybe you're doing a security blog. So one of the things I did to just learn how to effectively blog is I probably reached out one of the most well-known security bloggers out there, Brian Krebs, and asked Brian, what makes an effective blog? How do you really communicate? Obviously, you want to do it, be active, blog a couple times a week if possible. But one of the things that Brian really taught me was the title of your blog is everything. You've got to make it engaging, hit people at an emotional level. One of the best examples I've ever seen of that is I actually have to turn to a government organization. Yes, we're going to a government to learn how to effectively communicate, scary as it sounds. In the United States, we have something called the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And one of the awareness campaigns they have is how to prepare for a disaster. Turns out, does not matter what disaster you prepare for. Tsunami, hurricane, fire, flood, tornado. It's the same. 1 gallon of water per person per day. Blankets, batteries, flashlights, things like that. But nobody was listening. Their program was not sticking. It was hitting on deaf ears. In May 2011, the CDC did just a simple blog on preparing for a disaster. The content, the behaviors, same. All they did was change the title. How to prepare for the zombie apocalypse. 3 hours after that blog went live, the entire CDC network collapsed because the blog went viral. 2 days after the blog, CDC was forced to do a national public announcement. Zombies don't really exist. So interestingly enough, they were hugely successful by simply changing the title. To this day, if you go to the CDC's website, they now have an entire section dedicated just to the zombie apocalypse. So all they did to make their program stick was change how they were communicating their program. And once again, there's so many other ways to communicate. Here are just some different examples. Some of these I actually got from Facebook when I was visited their headquarters a couple years ago. Facebook is a wonderful example of a very outgoing culture, very anti-corporate. In fact, if you go to corporate headquarters, employees are encouraged to write, draw, paint on the walls at corporate headquarters. Just think about that for a moment. What would happen to you if you started painting Cartman from South Park on your corporate walls? So what you see the South Park guy over there on the left, that was on the wall on the door going into the bathroom. Darth Vader there, that's another little wall painting. Facebook, they turned it into a sticker. These are all just little reminders of, what you want people to do. The sticky pad in the lower right corner, that's one of my favorite. People love it. Do you use a lot of sticky notes in your organization? Those are easy to order, and people will be begging for them. What a great, fun way to reach people. But there's some other ways, too, we can reach. Self-education. So Lori Rosenberg from eBay was really one of the brainchilds behind this one. Create a portal, an intranet, that has all sorts of security resources and materials that people can actually use. Now, first lesson, make sure the security geeks don't create the security portal because it will look like it was created by geeks. Maybe have somebody from marketing or communications create something very simple that has key information that people can use. So keep it simple, keep it useful. Then what Lori did was sneaky. Anytime anybody in the organization communicated anything about security, patching, updates, meetings, whatever, she had them include in that email a link to this self-education portal. So as all these people are communicating, she started driving more and more people to self-education. So people can now learn. That's where you have your blog and your newsletter, FAQ, where they can download trusted software, things like that. So people aren't going there to read policy. People are going there to help themselves. Now, one of the biggest areas I'm seeing a lot of growth and a lot of impact from organizations is something called the ambassador program. Now, you may call it something else. People call it ambassadors, champions, sentinels, things like that. So a great example, John Heron over at Diageo in Ireland, Thomson Reuters over here in the United States. A lot of organizations have realized that to really effectively communicate and make awareness stick, it's not about just the security communications officer or the security team communicating. Wouldn't it be great if you could get coworkers or peers talking to fellow employees about awareness? And that's what the ambassador program is all about. If anybody out there is a big John Kotter fan, John Kotter is probably one of the leading thought leaders on change management, change culture, change behaviors, not from a security perspective, but any type. His book last year, Accelerate, is nothing more than the ambassador program. The whole idea is this. To really scale your security team, what you do is you build these ambassadors, you train these individuals throughout the organization in the world of security. Think of Security 101, just the basics. And the whole idea is this, these ambassadors, they're ordinary computer users, regular employees, somebody in sales, marketing, human resources, communications, research and development, IT admins, whatever. And these individuals get some basic training from you, maybe half an hour, half a day of training. And what they do is they help push out your message. A couple of reasons why this can be effective. A, it quickly scales you. Instead of just you now have 10, 50, 100, 500 representatives. B, individuals are far more likely to listen to their peers that they respect and or know than potentially you, because these ambassadors can communicate in people's language. They know the challenges that people are facing. But the beauty of the ambassador program is also the ambassadors become a funnel of information going back to you. Sales is saying, you know what? You keep training us on passwords. Passwords isn't the issue. We keep falling victim to phishing. We need training on phishing. Help us with phishing. So they can help you better tune what you're communicating or how you're communicating to it. Now, what we've seen key, though, with organizations that are doing the ambassador program is two things. And it goes, think again about that BJ Fogg model. How do we change behaviors? Motivate and ability. So how do we build ambassadors? Motivate and ability. Where I've seen organizations most effectively build ambassador programs, they really focus on motivation, what's in it for the ambassadors, and ability. How do we resource and train the ambassadors so they're successful? So it's actually easy to really help these ambassadors and motivate them. So for example, recognition. Security awareness officers grossly underestimate the power of recognition. Recognition is one of your most powerful weapons, and it's one of your most powerful motivators. The mistake is a lot of awareness officers overestimate money. Oh, we'll give them, a gift card, a free lunch, or something like that. No. Don't use money as a motivator. Don't use money as a reward. Use recognition. So, for ambassadors, one of the things you can do is when somebody joins the ambassador program or does something good, email their boss. Let their boss know what great work they're doing, and then copy the ambassador. Once a year, have the CIO or CEO email all the ambassadors thanking them. for their great job. File a report with human resources. So human resources know these ambassadors have stepped up and taken this extra responsibility. So the ambassadors now know this will help their promotions, their compensation, bonuses, their career. Let the ambassadors know that by becoming an ambassador, they're going to meet other ambassadors throughout other departments. So it's going to build their network, once again, helping their career. Let them know they're going to learn more about cybersecurity, helping them more personally and developing new skill set. Let them know their actions will have a direct impact to the organization and will make a difference. So it's actually easier to motivate these ambassadors than you may think. It's just you have to reach them at an emotional level. What's in it for them? And then we have to give them the ability. So in other words, train them. Be sure you give them the resources. Here's the slide deck if you want to do a presentation, an FAQ. Create an internal mail form for where ambassadors can communicate with each other, share lessons learned, develop materials. I've seen organizations actually give ambassadors budget. The key thing you're going to learn is different ambassadors for different departments or different regions. Say, ambassadors in Brazil will probably operate very differently than ambassadors in India or Singapore. So one of the things you got to understand is these ambassadors will help you understand the cultural differences and how to better communicate. Another one is gamification. To make awareness stick, make it fun. Gamify it. Now, when I say gamification, I'm not saying a game, shoot the ducks or create the best password or something like that. I'm talking about creating a structure where people's behaviors are measured and gamified. There's really good examples of how you can gamify learning. Two of my favorite, Khan Academy and Code Academy. So Khan Academy, the wonderful way to take math and make it fun by earning badges, points, achieving levels, things like that. By the way, if you have kids and they're struggling in math, I can't recommend Khan Academy enough. So really what gamification comes down to, if you boil it down, it's recognition. You're giving people recognition for what they've done by assigning points. And then they measure what they've done by the badges they've achieved, the levels they've achieved, and stuff like that. Now, this has always been hard to do in awareness because you're having to measure behaviors and then recognize people for those behaviors. The other thing I've seen is gamification does not work for all organizations. Not very good, especially for conservative organizations or older generations. Where I tend to find gamification works the best is in very outgoing, younger generational type cultures. So for example, an organization that I see really doing a great job on the whole side of gamification is Salesforce. Now if you think about it, Salesforce is the perfect place to do gamification. 15,000 employees. Tends to be very young. A lot of them are developers based in Silicon Valley, San Francisco. So you got a young, very technology-focused, outgoing culture. Salesforce also takes security very, very seriously. So they have the support. So remember, 15,000 employees, their security awareness team, led by Masha Sadova, 4 people. 4 people, full-time, not on security, but on security awareness. So it's the perfect culture, perfect environment, and they have the resources to do gamification. The perfect storm, if you will. So what's really neat is what Masha has done is created this whole Jedi level of stages because, they're mainly coders. Coders, mainly geeks. Geeks love Star Wars, Jedis, things like that. And she's created this tiered system based on what people do. So they measure behaviors, things like badges. Physical security is very important, so making sure everybody's using their badges. In other words, if somebody tries to draft in or sneak into a secured facility without their badge, are employees stopping them? That is a behavior to measure. Developers, how many bugs developers are introducing or how many bugs developers are finding in secure code reviews, things like that. Because they actually have a very strong awareness program for developers also. Are people ambassadors? If you're an ambassador helping promote the awareness, security awareness, you get points, you go up levels. So once again, they're taking, that's all gamification is, recognition. But they've taken it to the next level, formalized it, and people are far more likely to change behavior. So, and work with the Salesforce team, they are doing amazing stuff. But here is another way we can use awareness stick. You'll notice a lot of these ideas I'm coming up with, it's not so much just communication, but how to use others to help you communicate, how to amplify your awareness program. Another idea, leadership. What I'm starting to see more and more is leadership supports cybersecurity. You know, 5-10 years ago, when I was giving presentations like this, it was all about how do we get management, how do we get leadership to care about security? Well, a lot of us have felt pain, and a lot of leadership cares. What's interesting is this, they don't know how to communicate that. They don't know how to communicate that support or demonstrate that support. So one of the things you can do is help coach your leadership, your executives. Look, whenever you talk about security, talk about these 3 key things. Focus on that. Give them a cheat sheet, what to say. Or, whenever, exhibit these behaviors. People are watching you. Make sure you use your badge. Make sure you lock out of your computer. Things along those lines. If you're having problems reaching leadership, train their assistants. A lot of times their leadership's far more likely to listen to their executive assistants. So have a program where you're communicating to the assistants who then train your senior leadership. So leadership can be another way to help communicate your awareness program. They're probably supporting you. They just don't know how to best support you. All right. So to really bring this all together, all right, we started with a problem. People, in a lot of ways, are nothing more than another operating system. They store, process, and transfer information. The problem is not them. The problem is our community has done very little in the past 15 years to secure this operating system. We've done a great job of using technology to secure technology, but we've done a very bad job of securing the human operating system. And if you think about it, the reason why is this. Most people in charge of awareness programs are geeks like you and probably like many of you out there or me. We lack a lot of the soft skills it takes to communicate, the whole idea of curse of knowledge. So we in the security awareness world have to go out of our comfort zone, stop thinking in terms of bits and bytes, and start thinking of people at a human level, developing those soft skills. And where we really need to develop those soft skills is communication. If you don't have the time or the ability or the desire to develop those soft skills or communication skills, grab someone, bring someone in. Where I'm seeing a lot of organizations have success is they literally have somebody from the corporate communications or your organization's communications team and assigned to your security team. Some cases even embedded in your security team. Because hopefully everything if you take nothing else from this, ultimately awareness programs, behavior, changing culture, is ultimately all about effective communication. And in a lot of ways, we have been failing in effective communication. Now, we have a lot of resources out there at securingthehuman.org/resources to help you communicate your awareness program. We even have the planning kit, templates, and things like that. And for those of you out there who are interested in learning more about building awareness programs, I will be in London next month. I teach a 2-day class on building high-impact awareness programs. How do we really change behavior and culture? In this talk's been just a short small snapshot of that 2-day interactive class. So if you're interested in joining us for 2 days in London, or actually I'll also be teaching it in December in the United States, please join us at securityhuman.org/events. Would love to see you there. Okay, that wraps things up. We'll have time for questions. Just to remind everybody, this has been recorded. We'll be following up with an email in the next day or two on where you can find the recording and where you can grab the slides. Also, if you look in your chat channel, I'm about to type my email address. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. All right, Ben, we've got a couple minutes. Any questions from the community?
Yeah, we have a couple questions, Lance. The first one, the question is, referring to the pull method, can you provide maybe an example of this?
So yeah, pull method. Long story short, pull method is when really people initiate the communication. In other words, they do it on their own when they want. So anything where they can initiate it. So like computer-based training, they can start it and watch it when they want. The whole idea of like a self-education portal. People go to it and download the newsletter, read the blog, watch the Twitter feed when they want. Ultimately, the whole thing I'm trying to communicate is this, is the easier you make it for people to consume information, the more likely they'll listen. Next.
All right, yeah, looks like we have another question here. How do I get around copyright issues when setting up my security awareness program?
How do I get around copyright issues? Okay, well, one of the things you can do is this. If there's materials you want to reuse, there's nothing wrong with simply reusing them. Or one of the things you can do is simply point to the sites and go ahead, there's these great resources there. But if there's really good content that you really want to use and maybe modify, but you're concerned about copyright violation, well, either create something yourself or reach out to the people that are providing those materials so that we can, quite often they'll let you use it, modify it, or something along those lines. But it's a good point. We definitely don't want to violate copyright. And that's a great example of cultures. In some cultures, some parts of the world, copyright is not such a big issue. Sometimes you have to keep an eye out for that. Next question.
Yeah, Lance, we had a few questions regarding the slides. Are you going to be making these slides available for people to view later?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you've registered for this webcast. Before the end of the week, you will receive an email, and then the email will include a link to both the slides and the webcast.
We have a question about distributing or getting your security awareness program out there. Question is, I've seen studies show that posters are not as effective in changing behaviors. Do you have any other recommendations for visual displays for the security awareness officer to maybe put up around the office that isn't necessarily a poster?
Sure. I mean, first of all, once again, it comes down to culture. Some organizations, culturally, posters are popular. Something I'm starting to see organizations do is a lot of times there's big TV displays, in lobbies, cafeterias, offices. And what they'll do is they'll create materials, but digitally. And maybe it's a short video, maybe it's a poster, but digitally, and you kind of do a Ken Burns effect where it, slowly moves across the screen. But where they're pushing the materials out to the computer screens in the offices. Screensavers, not so much, but or maybe something like a mobile app. So once again, we got to think of how are people consuming technology, how are they consuming information, and we want to communicate in that format. So like I said, the TV screens in offices, it tends to be a popular one I'm seeing pop up now.
That's our last question. So unless you have any sort of final remarks.
Well, no, that's perfect timing. All right, folks, like we said, we'll be following up with the materials. If you have any questions, you have my email address. I'd love to hear from you. Even if you cannot make the class in London on 14, 15 November, if you are in London, we may be holding a social on the 12th. If you're interested in joining us for a pint, please shoot me an email. Otherwise, stay safe, stay secure, have fun. Thank you so much.